Mr. Calvini, we'd like to know why the IBBC, a bank, would be purchasing hundreds of millions of dollars worth of missile guidance and control systems from your company.
The IBBC has purchased billions of dollars worth of Silkworm missiles from the People's Republic of China, which they have pre-sold to clients in the Middle East, contingent upon the missiles being equipped with Vulcan guidance systems. My company is one of only two in the world which produce the Vulcan.
Who's the other?
Sunay. Ahmed Sunay.
Of Turkish Aerotech.
But why is the bank committing so much of its capital and resources to the sale of these missiles?
It's a test. Small arms are the only weapons used in 99% of the world's conflicts. And no one has the capacity to manufacture them faster and cheaper than China. What Skarsin is attempting to do is to make the IBBC the exclusive broker of Chinese small arms to the Third World. And the missile deal is the gateway transaction.
Yeah, but billions of dollars invested simply to be a broker. There can't be that much profit for them.
No, this is not about making profit from weapon sales. It's about control.
Control the flow of weapons, control the conflict.
No. The IBBC is a bank. Their objective isn't to control the conflict. It's to control the debt that the conflict produces. You see, the real value of a conflict, the true value, is in the debt that it creates. You control the debt, you control everything. You find this upsetting, yes? But this is the very essence of the banking industry. To make us all, whether we be nations or individuals, slaves to debt.
John Lilly once put it this way: there are no limits at all to the human mind whatsoever, except those we impose on ourselves because of our beliefs. And those limits are also beliefs to be transcended. And that's a view that suggests that the possibilities of human transformation are virtually infinite. And we have no way of knowing the outer horizon of what it means to be human.
And really, to understand all this, everything, you have to go very, very deep into a study of history, consciousness, neurophysiology, everything. You have to be the supreme eclectic type of leaning, and you really have to be wanting to know who you are and what everything's about.
And the thing that you'll find when you go to sacred sites, if you're very humble about it, is that you are on a personal journey, and the sacred site will respond to you in a way that is appropriate only to you. The information is always what you are searching for. And it's the intent you give that energy that defines whether it is used for right action or not. And it is inside these sacred spaces that you will be reminded that you are a god, that you are a bright star.
So what you're trying to do is move through the course without ricocheting off walls or creating karma. You're trying to slide through things smoothly. How do you do that? It's called flowing. There's a technique that you can do that will allow you to touch some part of your inner being that has more knowledge than your conscious state does.
Now, I'm going to make you a promise. What I have to say from this point on is not going to be a play on words. I'm going to tell it, as Paul Harvey says, the rest of the story that you don't hear in the news, that only a person who sat in the board meetings with these people, sat across the table from them, rubbed shoulders with them for 3 years, could have ever known. Things that I have not been willing to tell for the past 15 years for fear of my own safety. I've decided I cannot keep quiet any longer. So I hope you have those pencils and papers handy. In the early 60s, crude oil was chosen as the method of controlling the world. It affects every human being. There's only one thing that affects every human on the face of this earth. The toothbrush that you're going to use to brush your teeth with tonight is made out of plastic. Where does it come from? Crude oil. The plastic bag in the garbage can that you put in that you have in your kitchen, it comes from crude oil. The asphalt highway that you drove on in order to get here to this meeting tonight, it came from crude oil. The drugstore, the drugs that you buy, many of them come from crude oil. The shoes that you wear, more than likely they aren't leather. They're probably plastic. It came from crude oil. The polyester clothes that you're wearing, they're a product of crude oil. The price at the grocery store and the hardware store, it's going up because of the price of crude oil. Now, please write this one down, because it carries great weight with what I'm going to say tonight. What we pay at the gas pump is a form of taxation. Now, this is so important, I'm going to say it again. Very few things I repeat twice. What we pay at the gas pump for a gallon of gasoline is a form of taxation that goes to those who control the world. Jot this statement down, if you will, please. The standard currency of the world is oil. Whatever oil is denominated in will determine what the standard currency of the world is. Now, what is going to affect your life in the immediate? It's called Iran. It is the third largest oil field in the world. Iran has said that by a certain date, and by the way, that date was given to you tonight by Wendy. I'm not going to repeat it. I will afterwards in questions and answers if you'd like. I have a reason for not giving it right now. I'm being careful what I say tonight. I know this is being recorded. Iran has said by a certain date, we are going to flood the world with cheap oil. They have built their flow line pipes. They have their ports ready. They already have their oil wells drilled. They have the third largest oil field in the world. They've said we are going to flood the world with cheap oil. And, here's the clincher, we are going to denominate all oil sales in euros. Our president and vice president and Congress are shaking in their shoes because they know that if Iran succeeds on the date that they have said, that it will collapse the American dollar. Something must be done with Iran before that date. Watch out. A lot of people in the world have a nuclear bomb besides Iran. Why don't they go after them? North Korea, Israel, China. I could go on and on. Why don't they take them on? They have to have an excuse. You see, it was weapons of mass destruction. Did they exist? Why are they going to take Iran on now? Oh, you'll hear every reason in the world. There's a reason they won't tell you. They know that if Iran succeeds on the date that they say they're going to, it will collapse the American dollar. Because they'll undercut everybody in the world on oil sales. When President Eisenhower was President of the United States of America, someone came to him one day and they said, President, Smedley Butler is like you. President Eisenhower said, no. He had such a great admiration for Major General Smedley Butler, he said, I would like to be like him. Smedley Butler wrote a book. I'm going to give you a quote out of it. War is a racket. It always has been. It is possibly the oldest, easily the most profitable, surely the most vicious. It is the only one in which the profits are reckoned in dollars and the losses in lives. Only a small inside group knows what it's all about. It is conducted for the benefit of the very few at the expense of the very many. Out of war, a few people make huge fortunes.
Hey, you epic, welcome. Andre Hodge, infinite potential healing and servant of truth with you once more. And as always, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey. I hope during these epic, uncertain, crazy, insane times, perhaps, I hope to be an ally to help you gain the data points to help you navigate through it and see through everything going on and see the potentials in it as well, right? And what it's maybe triggering and showing in you and what's going on, potentially the people around you, the ramping up of uncertainty and the simmering of the temperature of society to reveal a lot in people, and perhaps a lot of the stuff being done to people in the 3D, the society, but also the multi-D energetically and the bigger scales of control. So I'm a bit late in my day, and down in Australia we're in the middle of sort of autumn, fall, and it's daylight saving this weekend as well. So we're going to less light, and I don't know how long I've got light for and stuff, and I've been processing, brewing, contemplating, exploring, acquiring data, perspectives to translate from my perspective what's going on, because I come from a very interesting background on many levels. Obviously, you know me for the spiritual stuff, but I've also mentioned the IT stuff, but finance was a big thing. I taught myself currency trading, and I was in the trenches 2010 and all that, around listening to Cliff High telling us that Bitcoin was going to be $100,000 at some point and stuff. So I've found myself in many scenarios in my life to be in the trenches of things just by my thoroughness, hard work and belief in myself to, say, conquer currency trading and IT engineer and self-taught and all that. And now being a practitioner and creating my own modality, because I don't feel there's any solutions out there, and along the lines of energy, hygiene and sovereignty. And right now I feel that they're the absolute peak way to exist, and it's an ally, and I've offered all that, and you can get into it and you know it all. But I found a lot in my life. I've been in scenarios to, say, succeed in certain ways which society would be about, but the outcome for me hasn't been about the success. It's about the knowledge of being in the trenches and the experiences to be here and to be able to offer this at a level of being very comfortable and stuff like that. So and I feel the mozzies are out and it's late, right? So if I'm a bit scattered and stuff, I'm probably teaching them a lesson. But I feel I'm very primed to be able to explain so much that's going on. And I've been contemplating with all the variables and the different levels of themes that I offer, a bit like the last release a couple of weeks ago was Amplify the Echoes Part 17, which was the big scales and how that all percolates down. I'm attempting to show the patterns, and so you can feel it yourself, how it all fits in alignment in all the streams and stuff like that. There's definitely something very fascinating, challenging, and on many levels it's disappointing and horrible and stuff, and it's having an effect on society and impacting us all differently in different regions and stuff like that. And so I was contemplating which theme to offer this next space to sort of explain everything and stuff, and I was contemplating doing a recalibration to a new energetic reality, which is very valid. The stuff that's going on with the war in the Persian Gulf with the Middle East and Iran and stuff like that, and then the shocks to the world relative to the economic sort of stuff. But not only that, the ripples and the energetically affecting things, and then the effect on the economy triggering the fear in people. And so the energetics are very fascinating, because one of the big things I felt maybe a month ago from when I'm releasing this, because that war's been going on, would be 5 weeks or so now, and or more. It was a bit after that, it felt like there was a big release of entities, right? So the economy, people are going into all F, like the butt clench. If I be vulgar of it, the old shit, like huge uncertainty, right? And so when the oil shock happened with the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz and stuff like that, the instant effect of that big energetic system, and I mean the energy of the oil and stuff and its foundation to the society and stuff, that massive industry isn't built to have like short-term shocks like that, right? So it had a massive impact in a short amount of time, and the ability to react isn't there and stuff. So that got translated to gas or petrol prices, depending which part of the world you come from and stuff. And so then it bubbles up the temperature of the uncertainty in this world, right? And so there's all sorts of uncertainty. I think humanity in many levels is still traumatized, and it's a constant level of trauma depending on which scale of events are going on from post 2020 and all the chaos 19 sort of stuff. And so it seems like we're in another event that's affecting us all on those bigger scales, which is very relevant to a recalibration release. And what I said about the energetic stuff, it feels like that sort of hitting people energetically if I just get to the point, because I don't know how much light I've got, but it affected humanity, the collective, and so most people don't perceive the intuitive and collective nature, but it affects us all in the other levels and stuff. And so I feel there was stuff done to the energetic grids, like there's always this fake grid sort of stuff where people can be sort of, whether they're aware of it or not, but shifted from a free space to a false grid under their feet and all this sort of stuff. And what I said about the mass entity releases on top, right? So people go into that uncertainty, the fear opens up their field and shit gets in and stuff. And so I feel like there's a lot going on in people's crowns to scramble them and all this sort of stuff. There's potentially hauntings massively going on. And people with that sort of that compression, they might go to drugs or alcohol or lower energy sort of stuff, and then there's all the seeking those shortcuts or the inability to deal with the reality sort of stuff, and they look for a substance to sort of be a catalyst to that, and then that shortcut can create other openings and stuff. And so there's a very valid potential for me to offer a recalibration theme, but what I feel is the very potent one that I can do is relative to the money, politics, control, and our potential theme. So this is going to be part 3, and I sort of, on my Facebook, I put a link to part 2, and I put it onto my, I'm going to try and do a bit more communication. I did it onto my YouTube channel as well, and I did a link to go to part 2, because I think what this comes down to, the bigger scales of things, and I'll just show you the narrative images in a sec, and but it comes back to what I offered, that really big release for me in part 2, which is about the limits to growth and that stuff that was in part 2 relative what was worked out in the 1970s about birth rates and resource usage and all that sort of stuff. And so us all in an idealistic world, we would long for, say, this peace and unity and all this sort of stuff. And then when these sort of things happen, right, we might look for someone to blame as like, why are you creating uncomfortable reality for us? And most people are driven by comforts, right? They want comfort and peace and all that, and being in dis-ease and an uncomfortable position and challenge and stuff. Most people resist that. And I would just offer you, like, if you're hardcore and into all this stuff, right? And the metaphor is, like, I feel like a lot of people have gone backwards and they're retreating back into the 3D. And I'll show you the images quick and all that sort of stuff. But I feel people have retreated and they've gone from their multi-D awareness to the 3D with all those energetic variables going on without doing the basics. And I have a lot of people around me that come through for many sessions and stuff, and they're very hardcore and thorough, and they'll get out their way and let me do my thing. And who they are at the start to the journey at the end, it's really always awesome to like take them from how smashed and energetically influenced and entities and hacks and shit to getting clear and all that sort of stuff, to remember like how good it is and how you can just ride the waves and all that sort of stuff. But what I would invite is that all of this stuff might feel like a big, the metaphor I was thinking, I used to go bodyboarding and surfing, and I've been going to the beach, like we've had awesome weather and stuff, and just freaking loving Earth, right? Like how amazing life actually is and all this freaking bullshit, right? Like, so just really enjoying life and finding like something, an outlet to remember that, and you're in a child and all that sort of stuff. But the metaphor I was feeling is, and I'm going to do the contrarian view, if you remember, I'll show you that in a little bit, but if you understand the waves and things like that, I was thinking like going to the beach, and I used to go to pretty big waves, and there's an awesome documentary that I would love to clip out there called Momentum Generation. It was about Kelly Slater in the 90s and those kids that became world champions and changed the whole surfing thing, and they were at Hawaii Pipeline, right? Momentum Generation. I would go watch it. It's freaking awesome, and I would love to clip the crap out of it, but it's copyrighted and stuff, and so I haven't been able to show it. But they were at big waves, and it's freaking scary out the back, right? And so I feel the metaphor going on, and this might be like how you can approach the energetics and spirituality and consciousness and all that sort of stuff, and watch how people are, because most people in fear, and they'll accommodate their fear and they'll retreat and stuff. Like I said, they're going back into the 3D 5 sense. If I show you the spiritual no man's land thing, and going in where all the big waves are, it's like a freaking no man's land, right? You want to get out the back where it's just like you choose your wave and then you have a good ride and stuff, but getting through that spiritual no man's land of the surf sucks, right? And the approach you do, this is what I'm getting to, it's like you might be like, no, you're in no man's land and it's a long way to get out the back of the waves, And so you might be seeing like an all shit freaking massive wave that's going to come and just absolutely smash you, right? And so you might think, oh, run away, run away. But what you have to do is actually you have to go into it. You go towards it and you try and beat it so the lip doesn't get you, and you get underneath and you dive deep, right? And I feel like there's just a lack of spiritual energetic instincts right now because it's game on, right? Like, the truth of an individual is known not when it's good but when it's bad, alright? And this is where all that work and all that investment in the game of life, like on Earth, like life in the 3D on Earth is the ultimate freaking test, right? Why do drugs or go play games? Like, just try and master existence, right? It's the ultimate freaking game and the ultimate like test and challenge. And I get why people want to do drugs and they want to check out and all that sort of stuff, but be here present, like it's the ultimate trip, right? And so me, like, I feel like I've created the ultimate like hack, right? Creating the energy hiding stuff and the sovereignty. And if you're sovereign and stuff, none of this stuff would affect you, all right? Or it might affect you, you might have uncertainty, but in the moment, like, you're pulling it all back. You make the best decisions in that moment. And, you know, if you're hacked and you've got entities and your energy's depleted and all that sort of stuff, then your ability to process and cognitively get through it all is very hampered. And so what it comes down to is, are you operating at the peak of your existence in this moment? And are you making the most of your precious peak awareness time? And all of this going on, there's all this stuff going on in society and all this, and this person is bad and this person is good, and this one has perspectives because he's got this vested interest, or this person won't go to multi-D and they won't do healing, so they're going to stay in the lower levels in the narrative and stuff. And it's like, there's such a new country of opportunity to be like uncharted territory energetically and multidimensionally and power through in spite of all this crap going on, right? So I feel like I'm going to put a lot together in this with a lot of clips and help you translate a lot that's going on, right? So I might just, what I wanted to do, I've got about 5 or 6 different images. If you see a guy with a green tie, and I might have shown a clip at the start just to get the oil focus and stuff of how big it is. I would love to show clips of a TV series called Landman, but it's on Paramount and it's got Billy Bob Thornton. It's written by Tyler Sheridan. I think that's his name. I keep getting wrong. He wrote Sicario and many other, like Yellowstone and stuff. If you can get to see Landman, the first 6 episodes or so of the first season are outstanding. There's such wisdom relative to oil and its true importance in the world. But I might have shown a clip with Lindsay Williams. I put him in Influences Part 6 about oil, and I would love to show a lot more in this, but I've got so many different clips, I'm going to probably limit it, right? But what I want to do, right, I want to show a clip, a cut down clip of the limits of growth, because I feel like there's all this boom and then COVID sort of happened. It was limiting us, right? And then we went dipped, and then we've been going, and then this sort of stuff is going on in the Middle East, which is impacting the economy and it's dipping. To me, the bigger level that's going on, and I might just show you the narrative image quick, right? Because I'm running out of light. I'm going to have to just go through and tell you what the clips are, and then maybe see what I've got at the end, all right? I'm just going to show that image though. So this money part 3, I'm not sure what it's going to be called, about oil, the reserve currency, and the battle for its control, right? Because if I showed the clip, I'm thinking with Lindsay, it talks about Iran, right? Interesting, right? What the that Lindsay lecture was, I think he did it in 2005 or 6, so it's 20 years old. It was like in the end of the Bush Jr. second term sort of thing, before the financial collapse, right? But this video is going to be aiming for the bottom 3 levels of the the narrative. So instead of going from top down, I'm going to try and help you get through all the crap going on to see through how it all relates, right? But say the third one in the middle, the limits to growth, the second one is like the behind the scenes of the politics, and the lower levels is the narrative and stuff, right? So a lot of this stuff is going to be like the second and third level of the narrative, okay? And I'm just going to move on because I don't have much light, right? So I'm going to show 5 to 6 different clips, right? And the first one I'm going to show is a cut down version of that limits to growth, just to set it up here, which is like the higher level of this relative to, now we're in this oil resource money sort of thing going on. It's a variable in that limits to growth, and it's, just imagine that was done in the 1973, so it's 50 years on, right? And I've got an idea of wanting to do simulation sort of videos because I've got some good stuff about that, but I might do that in a future one because I don't have enough time. The second clip I'm going to include is one of Bill Cooper, and it's relative to, it's a bit of the overview of the one world order, secret societies and higher levels of society, but it's also, he gives a really good overview of politics and the different versions of politics, right? And what we don't really understand, and they're talked about all the time, so it's really good. The third section I want to do, and it might be a group of videos, I came across a really cool interview with Glenn Greenwald, who introduced Edward Snowden back in 2014 and stuff, right? And he's offering a really good clip about the corruption and what's gone on with the Trump and all that sort of stuff, right? And it gets into Epstein and all that sort of stuff, and there's potentially stuff going on with the oil and manipulation and making a lot of money and all that, and with the posts that Trump do that stimulate a lot of market moves, and then people can trade it and all that. But then I mentioned in the last video about this Promethean update channel, and I've got a really good clip of that because it gets into, say, the money behind the Ayatollahs of Iran and stuff like that, and the British causing the shipping issue that caused all the oil shock and that. And then I want to probably offer a clip with Lindsey Graham, right? And it's about the big scale, like the wealthy, like the elites manipulating the markets, right? And so how they set us up, and with the price of gold and precious metals, there's been this effort to get into them, and then what's happened is this financial shock's gone on, right? And so the economy, like contrarian view sort of stuff, has kicked in, and then the price of oil has risen and all that sort of stuff, and it's brought the money back into the system, if that makes sense. And it's very metaphoric of what he said happened in the 1980s. And then it's also, the last main clip I want to offer is going back to that Discordian clip. If you've been through my stuff in the past, right? I offered that relative to the KLF, and Discordianism is putting all crap out there, information to distort everything and stuff. And I feel like what's going on is there's a lot of agents out there in the community, podcasters and all that, offering their perspectives, and very polarized against the lower layers of the narrative, but they're not understanding how the economy works and all that. And I've already probably shared some clips, right? So what I'm going to do is offer that limits to growth clip, and then I'll say hi, and I'll introduce the Bill Cooper clip, right? So I hope all that, I'm not going to have much light, but I'm just going to offer this as a big data download, right? And I'll build on this part 3 release in the future, right? So enjoy this first clip, and I'll see you on the other side, right?
Our riches and our numbers burden the world.
If you remember the dramatic pictures taken by the Apollo flyers of the Earth, standing out in space all by itself, no one after seeing that could deny that the world is finite. Then it's impossible for people to go on saying we have an infinite supply of air, an infinite supply of water, an infinite supply of minerals. Man must learn to balance his activities in nature against the regenerative power of nature, or he is inevitably going to join the Tyrannosaurus in extinction.
As we grow richer, there is rising concern about pollution, our ability to feed a growing population, and fears that we may run out of fuel and metals.
A computer at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology has been used to look at these problems, to analyze in broad terms the direction in which our world is headed. Sponsored by a group of businessmen and academics, the Club of Rome, its conclusions are revolutionary.
The most important lesson is that we're near the end of our development of society, which has been going on for about 2,000 years. And we've reached levels of prosperity which carry the seeds of disruption and necessitate a complete relook at the whole world's social, political, and other situations.
It's telling us that the world is in a completely unstable situation and is likely to fall to pieces if it doesn't stop growing.
Let's put it bluntly. Our option is not between this kind of society, present society, and a stable state society. It is between a stable state society and chaos.
Population now doubles in 30 years. Man now uses twice as much energy as he did 15 years ago, and industrial production has nearly trebled in the last 15 years. So great is our progress that it may push the Earth to its limits and beyond. We threaten a confrontation with nature. Progress to that confrontation is speeding up.
What we're really being told is that although nobody knows for sure exactly when it will happen or exactly what risk is the greatest risk man faces, scientists are fairly unanimous in saying that man does face extremely important risks.
When global population is doubling every 33 years, when resource consumption is doubling every 20 years, no long-term view of mankind can proceed without first forming some preliminary answers to these questions.
Professor Dennis Meadows, at a conference in Washington to mark the publication of his team study for the Club of Rome, The Limits to Growth. It concludes that economic growth always generates a crisis, that the road to riches is the road to disaster.
Even if we solve problems like pollution, growth within a century or so would lead to widespread famine and social chaos. Dennis Meadows and his team used a computer. He explains why.
With system dynamics, a methodology that we use, we organize the available information on the relationships in some system, and then we express these mathematically and put them into a computer to calculate the results. It's possible for men to perceive the individual relationships in a system, but very difficult indeed without any assistance from a computer to understand what their implications will be when they interact.
At first sight, there doesn't seem to be much relationship between farming and industry, but industry produces pollution, and pollution affects crops. So a change in industry affects farming via pollution. The man-made world consists of a whole complex of subtle relationships like that. Change one thing, and it sets up a slow and complicated chain reaction.
The equations in the computer define these relationships, so the computer can show how one thing affects everything else, not only immediately, but over many years. The runs on the computer show how these things would interact and affect man's future. They used the computer to see what would happen if man successfully tackled his obvious problems, if he grew more food, found more natural resources, and controlled pollution.
But first they ran the computer to see what direction the world would take if it ran its present course.
As the century unfolds, industry grows, as does food production and population. But we're using up all our raw materials, the limited metals and fuel in the earth. These run out. Without fuel and metals for the factories, industry collapses. Farming has become highly mechanized, and without petrol and electricity, food production falls too. There's no food and massive unemployment. So the population falls. People are dying. Dennis Meadows explains.
Because of the high population levels and the increasing industrialization, natural resources are depleted at an increasing rate, and finally they fall down to the point where the industrial system can no longer be sustained.
So they ran the computer to see what would happen if we solved the resources problem that caused the crisis in the first run.
This time, natural resources used carefully run down slowly. But industry continues to grow. This industrial growth produces a serious pollution problem. Pollution attacks both people and plants. Crops cannot grow, and farming starts to fail. The population starts to collapse when people die of hunger and pollution. Industry, without a workforce, collapses too.
But now pollution is permitted to rise because industrialization goes further, and finally pollution begins to impair the lifetime of the people and the productivity of the agricultural sector.
So in the next run, they assumed not only that we had solved our raw materials difficulties, but that we had controlled pollution as well.
So resources still run down slowly. Industry can expand. Pollution, now controlled, doesn't become a problem. Growth is progressing. But this time the population grows so large that food becomes a problem. Food production cannot keep pace with population. People starve. And industrial society collapses.
In this case, the land resources become insufficient, pressure on the land begins to lead to land deterioration, and finally food per capita collapses and brings about a population decline.
So on the next run, as well as pollution controls and a careful use of resources, they assumed that food production could be doubled.
Resources, still used carefully, fall slowly. Pollution, still controlled, is no problem. And now food production, backed by the Green Revolution, rises. The system is experiencing explosive growth. The lines go off the graph. This growth of industry is so huge and rapid that it suddenly generates a pollution problem, despite pollution controls. And the industry and the population collapses.
Because land is no longer a limit to growth, industrialization rises to the point where, even with the pollution control measures we had before, pollution becomes a very serious problem and again brings about the collapse. The runs illustrate very succinctly that pollution, natural resource depletion are not problems themselves. The problem is growth in a finite world. So long as we ignore that fact and rely on growth over the short term to solve our problems, overshoot and collapse of the form which we see in the world model seems to us to be absolutely inevitable.
But what about population? Was instability due to the pressures of population growth? A population that doubles every 30 years, that adds 70 million extra human beings to the planet every year? They ran the computer to investigate what would happen if nothing but population were controlled.
Population is stabilized. Only 2 children per family. Industrial production and food production surge ahead, and pollution rises too. The system is growing. But again, industry uses too many resources, which run out, bringing down the system yet again. Even with population controlled, growth brings us up against a resources problem.
So population control is not sufficient either. They made other runs on the computer, different combinations of policies. However they juggled population controls with pollution controls, with resource conservation, with food production, the result was a breakdown. A breakdown that implies millions of deaths and the collapse of civilized life. What had been the reaction of informed opinion to this study and its bleak prognosis?
Well, I think the study makes an important contribution to the environmental dialogue. It points up some of the fundamental issues that man is going to have to grapple with if he's going to survive and continue to improve his position on this planet.
Is there evidence that the base forces shown in the model are already at work in the world today? Some would say so, and go further. See the symptoms of growth in Vietnam and Bangladesh, in crime rates, and the state of the world's great cities.
You look at the city in America already. The city is falling apart from the center outwards, so that you can't walk in the center of the big American cities without running grave physical risks. They're covered in concrete in cars. The poorer people can't get out of the center and therefore form ghettos. The problems are overwhelmingly bad. I would go so far as to say that the troubles we see are all part of this business of an overloaded society that doesn't know how to conduct itself any longer. These are all symptoms of what Meadows is talking about, in my opinion. They're symptoms of instability, and that is what Meadows' model is telling us.
If one looks at the whole world, it is becoming better cultivated and more fully peopled than anciently. All places are now accessible, all open to commerce. And where once were hardly solitary cottages, are now large cities. What most frequently meets our view is our teeming population. Our numbers are burdensome to the world, whilst nature fails in affording us her usual sustenance. Our wants grow more and more keen, and our complaints more bitter in all mouths. In every deed, pestilence, famine, and wars have to be regarded as a remedy for nations, as a means of pruning the luxuriance of the human race.
Those words were an eyewitness report made during the decline of the Roman Empire.
The Dark Ages followed. If this study is right, then our society is threatened. No one knows when or how, but if it does mirror the world, if we can see in our problems the stresses of growth, then the world is unstable. Growth, it seems, has an awful logic.
It is so obvious, in a way. It's so simple to consider that we cannot continually and exponentially grow as we are doing now. Nothing in the world, nothing in life grows continuously.
Hey, welcome back. Right, so thanks for being here. That was a clip from the bigger section I put in part 2 relative to the limits of growth, right? And so I just wanted to offer that as the reference point of, say, the resources and stuff going on, and you can ideally see that maybe what's going on is by design, right? The big overall function of society at the moment is the limits of growth and the uncertainty of, you know, the perpetual growth and population numbers and stuff like that. So I feel on some level what's going on now is by design, and it's designed to create the chaos and the uncertainty and the inflation and all that sort of stuff, right? So what I want to do is offer a Bill Cooper clip now, right? And it's got a really good, it's a high level stuff, but it's also a good overview of all the politics sort of stuff, right? So I don't have much light. I'm just going to go through these, all right? And I'll see you on the other side, all right? Enjoy. I hope you get a lot from this.
they believe, and I believe that they're right, that the biggest danger to mankind right now is man himself, population. A study in 1957 told them that by 1990 the world population would double in 33 years. Can you imagine that? The world population of human beings doubled in 33 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew that it's an exponential doubling throughout history. Every time it's doubled, the interval has gotten shorter. So that was 33 years. The next doubling will take place in approximately 28 years. The next one after that, approximately 24 years. Can you imagine if the world population doubles again in 28 years from 1990? In other words, in the year 2018, the world population doubles. And we're having problems with food supplies and timber and clean water and clean air now. And then after that, it doubles again in another 24 years. That's why they created AIDS. Because they didn't want to have to go around the world and say, you, and you up against the wall, you've got to die today. And shoot them. They did it in a manner to where they could target what they consider to be undesirable populations. And I want to be very clear that I don't agree with them on this. And AIDS is really going through those populations.
That theory has made news. I've heard that before, and,
well,
and
this
it's been
isn't a
debunked
theory.
very clear by the public, saying, "Oh, that's ridiculous." But you're saying that that may indeed be the case.
It's not ridiculous. I actually saw this in documents, and the project name was Project Naomi. MK Naomi was the name of it. It was a CIA project. The AIDS, whatever causes AIDS, whatever that turns out to be, according to those documents, was developed at Fort Detrick, Maryland, under a CIA project called MK Naomi. It was financed by $10 million for the Department of the Army's biological warfare programs. It was carried out, supervised by the CIA, carried out by scientists who worked for the Special Operations Division of the Department of Defense. And it's doing its job.
And would you assume if AIDS doesn't work, there's a contingency plan for that even?
Well, I think that they have other things out there working concurrently. One thing I've learned about these men is they don't just do one thing. In case the public discovers what they're doing, or discovers that somebody's doing, whether they know who's really doing it or not, and stops it, what they have running is several concurrently running plans, so that if one or two fail, the other ones are going to take care of the problem.
It sounds pretty hopeless. I mean, based on that scenario, is there anything, any uprising or what?
Yeah, there is, but it requires that people wake up. It requires that they really learn the truth instead of live their life in fantasy land. You see, because nothing can exist without the consent of the people. Unless they buy it, it's not going to happen. And all of these plans lead to the public's ultimate acceptance of what they're going to do. In fact, they're designed to make the public ask for it. For instance, the burning of the rainforest in Brazil. I know people who are just up in arms. Stop this. We've got to stop the burning of the rainforest, which is exactly what the burning of the rainforest is designed to do. Because Brazil is a sovereign nation, right? How can you tell a sovereign nation to stop burning its own forest? You can't.
Brazil. Brazil went to the World Bank many years ago and said, we'd like to build Brasilia. We want to make a great nation down here in South America. We need a loan. The IMF said, sure. We'd be glad to give you a few $1 billion. But we want some collateral. Oh, Brazil said, fine. We own the wealthiest land in the world, the Amazon River Basin. Oh, they said, come on, let us have that as collateral, and we'll be more than happy to give you billions of dollars to build your country. They built Brasilia. They did everything imaginable. Finally, Brazil couldn't quite make it. Like none of these other third world countries can too well, except Chavez and a few others. They wouldn't denominate in dollars. And so they said, Brazil comes back and says, oh, we can't even, we can hardly even make the interest on the payments. The World Bank said, no problem. We'll be glad to give you another line of credit. You know, they didn't give them any money. Didn't give them any gold, no silver, diamonds. Brazil had all that. What did they give them? Computer entry. So the World Bank said, yeah, we'll be glad to give you another computer entry. We'll give you another line of credit. Brazil said, oh, thank you, thank you. Oh, but they said, remember, you gave as collateral the Amazon River Basin. Who owns it today? The World Bank. Brazil doesn't own it. They had to give it to them for another line of credit.
And all of these plans lead to the public's ultimate acceptance of what they're going to do. In fact, they're designed to make the public ask for it. For instance, the burning of the rainforest in Brazil. I know people who are just up in arms. Stop this. We've got to stop the burning of the rainforest, which is exactly what the burning of the rainforest is designed to do. Because Brazil is a sovereign nation, right? How can you tell a sovereign nation to stop burning its own forest? You can't. What they're asking for is control over a sovereign nation by a world governing body who can then send troops, a police force, to make Brazil stop burning the rainforest, and that's why they started the burning of the rainforest in the first place. You see, they went down there and they built a road across the Amazon jungle that went nowhere. There was no reason for this road to be built. There was no place to go. It doesn't go from here to a city on the other side. It just goes across the jungle and ends. And they built this road on purpose because they knew that most of the people in Brazil are so dirt poor that they would see this road as the answer to their prayers. Free land, free timber, a way to support their family, a way to become wealthy, or at least more wealthy than they were, which was no wealthy. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what happened. Millions of people headed out down this road and staked out some land and burned the forest and tried to grow crops. And they found that rainforest is no good for growing crops. It'll grow one crop, and then you got to go burn more trees and plant another crop because the soil is poor. And that's what's happening. Mm-hmm. And that's why the forest is being burned. And it was done intentionally to create the scream of stop burning the rainforest so that then they could offer the solution. The solution is a world governing body that can then order and enforce that order of Brazil to stop burning the rainforest.
So the green movement worldwide is now just a manipulation
yes.
of... Now it's been proposed time and again too that big business is behind things like this, and that would represent a capitalist approach. But what you're saying is we're heading toward a socialist approach based on this scenario.
You have to understand the difference between capitalism, socialism, communism, what all of these things really mean. You have to understand that what the difference is between right wing and left wing. People, they use these phrases all the time, and they don't even know what these things mean. And it's just incredible to me to hear a socialist calling someone else a Nazi. Because Nazi means National Socialism. So here's a socialist calling a right-wing guy a Nazi, when what he should be calling the right-wing guy is anarchist. People on the right want no control. Mm-hmm. They're really anarchists. Okay?
So they would, in theory then, or in fact, be in opposition to this ultimate movement.
Yes.
Whereas in appearance, they would be the ones behind it.
Well, when you have a misunderstanding of what the terms mean, yes.
Okay.
Right-wing, on the far right, is total anarchy. They don't want anybody controlling anything that they do, and they believe that people are responsible enough that the world can exist without government.
Okay.
Are the very minimal government that it would take to... On the far left, on the other hand, they believe that the government should be in total control and should be supply man with all of his needs.
Well, creating a whole society that's dependent.
Right. A republic is somewhere in the middle. It's governance by laws. Laws are decided by representatives who are elected by the people. And according to the theory, the representatives will do what is right, whether they get elected or not, because it's not really a democracy. A democracy is far left. People don't understand. We don't live in a democracy. This country is not a democracy. It is a republic. A democracy is ruled by the mob. The mob always votes themselves every kind of benefit that they can vote themselves. And whenever you do that, it means large, tremendously overpowering government in control.
They vote themselves into dependency.
That's it. They vote themselves into a dictatorship is what they do, where they lose all of the benefits that they intended to vote themselves into in the first place.
Okay.
And democracies are extremely dangerous to minorities, because if the majority of people don't like you,
right,
they're going to vote that they kill you, and they can, you know, that's it. Democracies are dangerous. Democracies are socialists. Democracies are communism. That's what communism is. The definition of communism is everybody doing according to their talents and receiving according to their need. And it doesn't work. We already know it doesn't work. Man, by his inherent nature, is greedy. So those at the top always end up having everything, and those at the bottom end up having nothing in communism. Socialism is different. Socialism usually ends up in a dictatorship, in a very controlling dictatorial government which even owns the people that it governs, so that those who live in fear of not having are provided for what they need, and in turn they worship this oppressive government. Socialists are children who went out into the world, took a look around and said, I can't handle it, and went home to Daddy.
Okay.
Daddy, protect me. Daddy, feed me. Daddy, loan me your car. Daddy, tuck me in at night. Socialists are scared little children who are irresponsible, can't stand on their own 2 feet, and need Daddy to take care of them.
Okay.
Okay?
Now we got the...
But what happens when you go home to Daddy and Daddy does all these things for you? Tell me.
Well, you never leave the home. You've got no reason to. In other words, if you're being provided for in that way.
You're being provided for, but what does it mean? Doesn't it mean that you have to do what Daddy tells you to do?
True.
Doesn't it mean you have to be in when Daddy tells you to be in? Doesn't it mean that you can't drive the car to the next town if Daddy tells you you can't? Doesn't it mean that if Daddy tells you to take out the trash, you better take out the trash? Are you beginning to understand the concept? When you ask for favors from Daddy, you have to give up freedom in return.
Right. Okay.
So socialism always leads to repression of liberty, freedom, equality. All of those things fly out the window, so that you can have free health care, so that you can have a place to live but you don't have to pay the rent, so that you can have food given to you by the state. And that's where we're headed. Right in this country right now, we're almost totally socialist, and now people are screaming for a national health care policy.
Right.
Health care insurance.
Now, the other aspect, once again, I'd like to go into is the anarchy, or the right wing, which we just into that similar...
Anarchists believe that they can be responsible, that they won't hurt other people.
Okay.
That your freedom never ends until it begins to infringe upon someone else's freedom. And that no one should have any control over that. That there should be no speed limits on the highways. The problem is that, again, just like on the socialist side, you have people over here that are human, and human condition means that ultimately somebody's not going to be responsible, that they're going to drive too fast when they've had too much to drink, and they're going to kill innocent people. The answer is a balance. You know, the law of the universe says this. It's a law of physics, really, and everybody can understand it. For every action, there is an equal but opposite reaction. There can be no good unless there is evil. There can be no man without a woman. You understand the concept?
Based on that, the theory of a utopia here on Earth is corrupt. right away.
Absolutely.
It goes against the laws of physics.
It goes against the law of the universe that there must be two opposing forces all the time in every instance, because that's what makes the universe work. That's what makes everything work. What we need to do is stop trying to go way over here and establish some utopia of freedoms, or way over here to establish some repression of freedom so that we make sure that we got something on the table to eat. And strike a balance between the two that works. And stop withholding information. What makes it difficult for anyone to succeed or live, or for us to really come together and have peace in this world, are all of these people who think that they are the guardians of the secrets of the ages and have only them have truly mature minds, so only them are worthy of knowing the secrets and the real science and the real metaphysics and all of these things. So they repress it and they keep it secret. So the rest of us live out our lives and we don't know the truth of what life is really all about. Therefore, we're always stumbling over each other and getting in each other's way and doing the things that we profess that we don't want to do, simply because we don't have access to the truth. If we had access to the truth... Now, I got to tell you this. Back when these men first began establishing these societies, these mystery schools, and suppressing information, the common man was uneducated, did not have an intellect capable of understanding these secrets. They were really beasts of burden, for the most part, and they lived their whole life in toil.
Right.
But things are not that way now. Most people have a good education. They have a good mind. They're capable of understanding if they're taught, and if they're taught correctly. And I think it's time to teach people what the truth is and quit hiding it, so that we can come together as one humanity and make a balance and live together in a balance. You know, evil's never going to disappear. Neither is good. But we can maintain a balance and life can be good. Instead of swinging back in this tremendous battle between these two opposing, radical, extreme ends of the scale. That's got to stop. I've never understood why somebody would join together in this band of people and call himself a Democrat and not vote for anybody else if they're not a Democrat. That concept is beyond my understanding. And Republicans and Libertarians and Populists and Communists and Socialists and this and that, and blacks and whites and Indians, and there are so many sects and groups and segments, and we're so fragmented that getting together is going to really be difficult. But we've got to do it. Because if we don't wake up and do it ourselves, these men who meet in secret and plot the manipulations are going to do it whether we want it or not, and they're going to do it at the point of a gun. And they're going to take away everybody's freedom because they don't consider us responsible.
Capable of having that freedom.
Are capable, or even of using our intellect. So they'll put us in shackles and control us and force us to be peaceful. That's what the plan is, and that's what the New World Order is all about.
Hey, welcome back. Thanks for being here still. I hope you got a lot from that. And I'm really appreciating Bill Cooper now. Like, after all these years, it was that sort of stuff was from 1992, right? So the Lindsay, the green tie, I include a little clip relative to Brazil, and it's showing the control of the money at the high level sort of stuff. I'm going to offer bigger Lindsay stuff in the future. This was going to be quite long with all the clips and stuff, and I just wanted to touch on it, but give you the overall data points of the pattern recognition of everything and stuff, right? So what I'm going to do is focus on corruption a little bit, but it will hopefully offer different layers of things, and the projection and the confusion of the reality, not understanding all these bigger things, and then I'm going to come in with a Lindsay clip, right? So what I'm going to do is offer 3 clips sort of together. It'll be the Glenn Greenwald clip, Glenn Greenwald, because I'm trying to be quick, right? And it's a bit of an interview with the corruption that's gone on and stuff like that, and the markets, but it's also the bigger scale of things. I may include a clip from Spectre with Daniel Craig. I may not. It's going to be quite long. Then I want to offer a clip of the Promethean update. I've talked about them. They're quite balanced towards Trump. And it's all about the British US going the last 250 years. And it gets into like the consequence of Trump going in and that, and the undermining by the British to create the financial cost of oil and stuff, right? And then I want to offer a clip relative to Lindsay and the market manipulation at a bigger level that's all behind all that is a constant theme throughout society and stuff, right? So what I might do is come in before that and offer the contrarian view sort of stuff, right? So enjoy the clips here, right? And I'll see you on the other side.
All right, Glenn Greenwald, thank you so much for coming, man.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Huge fan of you, legendary Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, obviously known for breaking the Snowden files and all that stuff, which is incredible. And you know, the work you're doing now is also still very impressive.
When I was talking to people close to Trump in the 2024 campaign, and then even after he won in the transition before he was inaugurated, the thing I heard the most was, and this this is my own view as well, is the big problem that they had in the first term was they just got steamrolled by people who knew Washington way better than they knew it. Like Trump got there, he didn't know how Washington worked. He didn't know all the vipers and the pits of snakes that were everywhere. And he got infiltrated. There were a lot of people he appointed to his administration, who he empowered, who were there to work against his agenda and subvert it and not promote it. And this time around, they were like, no, we're never going to let this happen again. This time we're going to consolidate power and we're going to do what we want, which I was glad about because I felt like the people that were impeding in that first term his better impulses. But I think one of the things that it's impossible to overvalue is the fact that the Democrats were not trying to just defeat Donald Trump in the 2024 election. They were trying to imprison him for life. Had he not won that election, he would have gone to prison for life. They'd already had secured this preposterous conviction in that Manhattan case for the Stormy Daniels payments. Mm-hmm. Jack Smith had 2 major felony cases against him for the documents and for January 6th, another one. They wanted to imprison him for life and almost certainly would have. And he was not just fighting to regain the presidency or avoid losing twice. He was fighting for his life, basically. And there were a lot of people who came and exploited that desperation. People with a ton of money who were originally behind Ron DeSantis, billionaires who are Zionists, who care mostly about Israel, who want wars. And they were the ones who, with their money, endeared themselves and ingratiated themselves into Trump's, circle. And for Trump, money does speak, and he respects money.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that co-option came from that.
And, it also does seem like there's been more shady backdoor stock market bets that have been happening recently. I think I just saw something this morning about like somebody made $1.5 billion in like 10 seconds betting against the oil or betting on the oil prices dropping or something.
Yeah, because when Trump announced, we're going to do a deal with Iran, we're going to have a 5-day, not a 5-day ceasefire, but a 5-day window. Mm-hmm. Of course, the oil markets and the stock markets reacted very well because they want this war to end very desperately.
Yeah.
And if you know that's coming, as obviously people knew, as those incredibly aberrational bets demonstrate, then you're going to make a ton of money once that speech is not. And this is not the first time this has happened. Mm-hmm. I spent a lot of time on the Hunter Biden case. I actually had a media outlet that I founded that I quit when they wouldn't let me do the reporting I wanted to do on it right before the election. Yeah, The Intercept. So I spent a lot of time on the Hunter Biden case. I thought what the Biden family was doing, it wasn't just Hunter Biden, but it was Joe Biden's brother and Biden himself in places where they had a lot of influence, like China and Ukraine, trying to profiteer off their political influence, was genuine corruption. This is on a completely different scale. Like Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff there's just nothing but billionaires surrounding Trump. He's doing his kids are doing all kinds of crypto deals. We talk about like Nancy Pelosi's stock portfolio and the way she was able to, as everybody jokes, was like the greatest stock trader in history. She's incredibly lucky. Like every stock she sells goes down and every one she buys goes up. Obviously using the information that she has as the Speaker of the House, the highest ranking official in our government. The Trump family and the kind of adjacent people around them are profiteering in a way that makes, Hunter Biden look like a small-time shoplifter. It's shocking.
It is crazy to see. It really is. But it does give me hope that some of the people that were some of the biggest advocates for Trump this time around, and some of the biggest people campaigning for him in the public light are now like actively, openly questioning some of the stuff.
You mean like podcasters?
Like podcasters,
like Rogan,
like Rogan and Tucker, right? These types of folks. And I never saw any of that on the other side, with Biden or Obama. So the same people that were advocating the most for them never publicly came out and said like, "Whoa, hold on a second."
If you ask every liberal, they'll tell you the American right, MAGA. But even I heard this, back in the day with George Bush, like conservatives, Republicans, or cult members, they don't question their leadership. There's so much more attacks on Trump from within the American right, including people who had supported him and worked very hard to help elect him, than there ever has been. You have a very hardcore left-wing component that's barely within the Democratic Party, like the real hardcore leftists. They will, they attack Biden for supporting Israel and its destruction of Gaza, things like that. But the sort of normie liberal, the big, media influence, like the Rachel Maddow types, like they're just in the pocket. They're hardcore blind partisans. They will never utter a single phrase. And I think the American right deserve credit for that. The problem is Trump has made his choice very clearly. I mean, he denounced and basically expelled from his little treehouse, the MAGA treehouse, Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie.
This is the crazy thing to me, is that like, it seems like to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never seen a president who's more poll aware than Donald Trump, who keeps track of the polls and knows exactly what the polls are doing at all times. But the one poll that he's Helen Keller on is the Israel one and the Epstein one. Like that's the one he just ignores completely.
So he's not just conscious of it, he's willing to adapt him. He's a good politician at the end of the day. Like, you don't get elected twice unless you are. And yet with Israel and Epstein, and we talked about those like they're separate, but they're actually very inextricably linked, suddenly he's just willing to take the most unpopular position, or more so afraid not to. And I think it's very telling.
And one of the things you couldn't definitively say 10 months ago is that, well, I mean, you could, but people could, rightfully question you, is that the Epstein and the Israel thing was like not in stone. You couldn't say that for a fact. Like, there was no conclusive evidence. But I think now there's no way anyone can question that. And I don't think even like you can even say, I think you can rightfully say that Israel probably, I think he was above them. I think it's probably likely that he was like on the layers of society that all these Epstein files have sort of made visible to us, is that like there's our layer, there's this intelligence layer, then there's this you have like the nation state layer of the people that run the nation states and all that, like the politicians and all that. And then above them, then you have this Epstein Rothschild layer, these people that are really like, they're working behind the curtain, doing arms deals with the Trilateral Commission and doing all this other crazy stuff, living lawlessly and manipulating and profiting off of any and every conflict that they can find around the world.
Exactly. I mean, to me, this is the most important part of the Epstein story, at least insofar as what we've seen thus far. And there's still a lot of documents the government is hiding. They thought that just by releasing a few million, that people would be like, okay, and be satiated, a common tactic when governments want to pretend they're showing the truth, but they withhold the most damaging truths.
Right.
So insofar as what we've seen so far, there has been stuff that maybe has been overstated or at least unproven, in terms of like Epstein Island being this, place where Bill Gates went and 6-year-old girls and Bill Clinton had sex with like 9-year-olds and it was all videotaped and then they were blackmailed. Like, there's some of that could have been overstated. But I just want to say two things about just like the like purely sexual part, like the file part, about who was accused. Like, probably some people were swept up in accusations that at least as of yet haven't been proven. To me, the two most important things are, well, one is exactly what you just said. We have the Epstein files, but then we also have, and this got so little attention for reasons we could talk about if you want, but the Iranians hacked into the emails of a bunch of high-level Israeli officials, including former Prime Minister Ehud Barak, who was Jeffrey Epstein's basically best friend.
Yeah.
And they published it online. There's these hacked emails that are online that you can go and read. And very few journalists were interested in reporting on them. And in part it's because journalists like scoops that only they have when something's dumped on the internet. They don't like to report on it. But there's this outlet called Drop Site News, which is founded by a couple of my colleagues like Ryan Grimm and Jeremy Scahill, who are great reporters. And they've had journalists like Murtaza Hussain going through these emails. And what that description that you just laid out about Epstein's relationship to Israel, to this kind of upper layer above nation states, including Israel, is very much proven in these emails. Like, it is actually true that Jeffrey Epstein was performing extremely sensitive and high-level foreign policy transactions for Israel with the Mossad, but he was also doing it for a lot of other countries. And, we're talking about before we went on air, this morning, I happened to see a couple of photos with Jeffrey Epstein with the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman. And it wasn't like like one of those pictures where you just are at some event, you meet a leader and you take a picture, like a very formal picture. They were like giggling and laughing. It was like very festive and boisterous. It was a social event, clearly. And the interaction was social in nature. And I think someone said like, oh, I know somebody who would be of great use right now in sensitive diplomacy in the Middle East, meaning Jeffrey Epstein, because of how intricately connected he was to everybody. And I think that is what we've learned the most about that there is this Epstein world. And it's a group of, there's that photo.
Oh my gosh.
I know. I mean, this is like a very serious guy, like Mohammed bin Salman. He's not a joke.
I've never seen him without his thing on his head.
Yeah, and like with his arm around him. This is like supposed to be a devout Muslim, by the way. I don't know if you've been to the Persian Gulf, but
no,
you have like the elite level who lives exactly the opposite of this pious, like just very religious life. And it's really just imposed for the peasants who go to prison if they like look at a woman the wrong way.
Yeah.
The division is, here you see it. I can't think of a better, manifestation than this. And this is it's a transnational global elite of billionaires and oligarchs and people who are sociopaths who just move massive amounts of money around, kill people, this is the most amazing thing to me about the Jeffrey Epstein thing that's blown my mind from the beginning. He was convicted of serious felonies, of soliciting a minor for prostitution. He's a registered sex offender. Everybody knows this. And yet it didn't impede his standing in this world even a little bit. That's how just bereft and depraved this world is, that absolutely resides above governments or nation states or anything like that. And Jeffrey Epstein was an absolutely integral part of that. And that is what the Epstein files, for me, revealed the most.
Yeah.
Lloyd's of London blinked. Just days after suspending shipping insurance for oil tankers in the Strait of Hormuz, they reversed themselves and announced that they want to work with the United States to keep ships and oil moving. Most people think they know why. President Trump had called their bluff and announced that he would keep the strait open. He also called Russia's President Putin, and he lifted some sanctions on Russian oil, in a move that the globalists called self-defeating. But that's still not the whole story. The real reason is that the world is going through a fundamental remake, and an even bigger scandal has erupted about the British, about the money ties between London and Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei. Globalist think tanks and press will continue to insist that Donald Trump is stumbling into another forever war, that he's unleashing economic chaos and courting midterm disaster. I'm Susan Kokinda, and for decades I've exposed how the modern British Empire lurked in the shadows, keeping the world in turmoil with wars, economic control, and terrorism. Today, I'm going to look at three things. First, what Trump did to force Lloyd's to blink. Second, the money ties between Iran's new supreme leader and London. And third, how John Bolton, Mark Carney, and other globalists are out in the cold, along with London. So the U.S. engagement with Iran is not exactly playing out as the globalists expected. The cancellation of war risk insurance by the empire's oldest insurance company was supposed to bring shipping to a halt, spike oil prices, and shatter economies. Operation Epicure was supposed to be economically and politically disastrous for President Trump and backfire against him. But the president was ready. He moved on 3 fronts simultaneously, and Lloyd's never recovered. First, he announced that the Development Finance Corporation would step in with political risk insurance. Lloyd's had pulled coverage. Washington replaced it within days. Second, he announced the Navy was on notice to protect shipping in the Strait as needed. And third, this is the move that tells you everything about how differently this president thinks. Trump lifted some sanctions on Russian oil. Not only that, he got on the phone with President Putin to discuss the conflict in Iran. So let's put this all in context. Last week, Donald Trump branded Britain as our former closest ally, the same Great Britain which has led the charge to sanction Russia and keep the Ukraine war going, and the same country which is home to Lloyd's of London, which just tried to strangle world oil supply. So instead, Trump turns to Russia to get oil moving and chats up Putin for an hour. Because the empire isn't just being outflanked, it's being exposed. And part of that exposure is the financial ties between the mullahs and London. Back in January, Bloomberg dropped a 2,700-word article, which just sort of sat there like an unexploded bomb. Until now. When you look at the title, you'll know why. How the son of Iran's supreme leader built a global property empire. Now, that son of Iran's supreme leader is Mojtaba Khamenei, who was just elected as the new supreme leader several days ago. And the global property empire, well, it's concentrated in London. Bloomberg tracked the financial holdings of Mojtaba Khamenei. The front companies managing their family wealth aren't registered in Tehran. They're registered in the Isle of Man and St. Kitts. The Isle of Man and St. Kitts aren't random offshore jurisdictions. They are nodes of the City of London's offshore banking network, the same City of London that just tried to spike oil prices against an American president at war. So let's call it what it was. The Iranian Revolution wasn't a revolution. It was a management arrangement. The mullahs raged against the West in public, and in private, the family money went to London. And this isn't the first time. Go back a few decades to the infamous Al-Yamama deal with Saudi Arabia, the largest arms deal in British history, connected to the royal family. An arms deal that provided off-the-books money flows that could be traced to 9/11 participants. Quick footnote. The first foreign visit that Donald Trump took in his first term was to Saudi Arabia to tell them to stop financing Islamic terrorism. He knew then, he knows now. And you can bet that Trump's team, especially Scott Bessent, can read a Bloomberg article. So the Al-Yamama deal was version 1. The Khamenei property empire in London is another version. Britain has been financing Islamic fundamentalism for decades. The chaos in the Mideast with Iran as the crown jewel, that was part of the business model. And London managed it for 47 years, until this week. And this week, Trump made sure that the world could see it. So the insurance checkpoints are being replaced. The Khamenei money trail leads to London. Trump is remaking the strategic landscape. What's the establishment's response? John Bolton is giving interviews that reflect a certain state of mind.
Well, I've said from time to time, the only question is who gets me first, the Iranians or Trump?
Now, Bolton's actual complaint is that Trump doesn't play by the rules which have kept presidents in check.
It's not at all clear to me that Trump is. He doesn't do grand strategy. He doesn't even do policy the way we normally understand it. So I'm not sure exactly what his thought process is, because we know the normal National Security Council process is all but non-existent in this second term.
Did you catch what Bolton is actually defending? A national security process. The one that produced 20 years in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, the one that managed the Iranian threat for 47 years without ever resolving it, because resolving it wasn't the point. Now, here's someone else who's out in the cold. The central banker's prime minister, Canada's Mark Carney. the man the globalists have assigned to try to rescue some kind of rules-based order.
We were not consulted before it began. We're not engaged in the conflict. We do not intend to engage. What we are doing, where we are engaged, is dealing with the consequences of the conflict, consequences that continue to spread.
That's the special relationship in 2026. The City of London's chief spokesman standing outside the fence, waiting to see how it ends. Now, there are still way too many voices in Trump's own base right now saying he's been captured, that Bolton got his war, that the globalists won, that this is Iraq all over again. But look at who's actually complaining. Bolton can't get his national security process. Carney can't get in the room. The people who ran the old system are on the outside looking in, and they're furious. That's not what a neocon takeover looks like. That's what the global elite are looking at from the outside. That's why Lloyd's of London had to blink, because for the first time in a very long time, an American president is conducting an American foreign policy, not an imperial one. Become a member of Promethean Action and be part of that movement, a movement that keeps people focused on the real fight and the real enemy, the ones we've been fighting for 250 years.
Hey, thanks for being here. I'm still in the light, but I'm not too much longer, right? So I probably offered the 2 clips that I said, right? Interesting, hey, right? So that's, you can see, ideally I'm giving you some data points of people saying corruption and all that, but I feel there's so many vested interests to try and, say, take away the control and put in a new system, or there are agents, or they've got bones to pick, or all that sort of stuff, right? But they don't understand the full ramifications of what's going on and the limits to growth and all that stuff of the controllers and all that, right? So I'm just going to get the contrarian view image quick, right? So the reason I just want to show this is about the business cycles of going up and going down, and when things are, there's like a channel, it goes up, goes down, and when it's at the top, there's usually a fall, and when there's at the base, there's a potential rise. And I showed these in our intuitive potential part 5 and 6 around the Trump election. I called the Trump election because things went through the floor, and it was like very ominous and stuff. And the logic of me showing this is most people, when they're at the peak, they go like it's never going to stop. Or when it's like at the bottom, it's like Chicken Little, the sky is falling, like it's never going to be better and stuff. I would just offer we're in a bit of a cycle at the moment, but life goes on, right? But the reason why I want to just show you this quick is relative to this clip, relative to Lindsay, how epic it is of the manipulation of the higher level beings that just run things, right? Because I feel there's a bit of a metaphor going on at the moment. And yeah, things like, I mentioned about how gold was like, and silver were new highs and all that, but they've come off a lot and that, and it's like, this clip will be very potent if you're across all those things, and it'll be very interesting, right? So this is sort of tying off the corruption sort of variable, right? So I'll leave you with it now, and I'll see you on the other side, right? Enjoy.
The powers that be have an agenda. They know what they're doing. I heard them talk about a 30-year plan for the Arabs when I was the chaplain on the Trans-Alaska Oil Pipeline, and I have watched them carry out their plans meticulously without one single flaw. Now, before I give the next very startling portion of this lecture, I want to give an example. You'll very readily recognize this. Any of you who are 50 and above, you'll easily remember back these days. In 1984, I had a phone call one day. It was from Mr. Ken Fromm. He was back with Atlantic Richfield down in Houston. You know, even the powers that be sometimes are a little proud and haughty. Have a good time bragging. And he used to call me up on the phone from time to time, and he'd say, well, Lindsay, this, that, and the other. And this time he called me up on the phone, and he said, Lindsay, are you going to be speaking anywhere around America over the next month or two? I said, yes, Ken. In fact, next week I leave to go to Seattle, Washington, and about 2 or 3 months later, finally wound up in Southern California with speaking engagements. He said, well, Lindsay, I'd like you to tell your audiences everywhere you go something that is going to kind of put your speech on the map. He was bragging, feeling good that day. And I said, Ken, what do you mean? Now, oil at that time was $32 a barrel. We thought it could never go any higher or the world would go broke. And he said, Lindsay, I want you to tell your audiences everywhere you go that crude oil is going to $10 a barrel. I said, Ken, no. No. I said, that can't happen. I said it would break the Arab world. It would break the oil-producing countries of the world. I said the people would rise up against their leaders and against their sheikhs and sheiks. I said, no, that can't happen. You can't go to $10 a barrel. Ken said very quietly on the phone, Lindsay, come on now. You sat in our board meetings. You know who tells OPEC what we're going to give them for a barrel of oil. He said, Lindsay, you know who's doing this. He said, now come on, take my word for it. It is going to $10 a barrel. By the way, do you know what the price of gold was back at that time? $800 an ounce. You remember it spiked up to that? The powers that be who had made the Arabs and the other oil-producing countries of the world had said to these wealthy sheikhs and sheiks and others, they'd said, buy gold. No greater investment in the world than gold. They bought it. They bought it by the train car loads. They lined their swimming pools with it. They bought their Rolls Royces and their gold. They had everything they wanted, and they paid $700 and $800 an ounce for it because they'd been told by the people who I'm going to tell you who they are before I finish my lecture tonight. You're going to be surprised who they are. They'd been told by those people to buy gold, and they did. But you see, it was all a trap. Just like what's happening right now in our economy. Interest-only mortgage on your house, it's a trap. On and on and on I could go, it's a trap. They know what they're doing. Taking interest down to 1%, it was a trap. They told the Arabs, buy all this gold, it was a trap. Ken Fromm said, Lindsay, it's going to $10 a barrel. I begun telling that to my audiences as I arrived in Washington State. Sometimes the people in the audience would literally start giggling. They thought, you're crazy. You know what you're talking about. When it finally happened that it went to $11, didn't quite go to 10, went to $11 a barrel. When it went to $11 a barrel, I thought my telephone was going to ring off the hook. Everybody said, you're a prophet. I said, no, I'm not a prophet. I just know the people who are doing it. You know what the price of gold went to at the same time that oil went to $11 a barrel? You know what it went to? Remember? Went down to $300 an ounce. Who took it there? Same people that are taking it up right now. Why did they take it there? because they knew that the oil-producing countries of the world who had signed on the dotted line, whom they had sold their gold to at $700 and $800 an ounce, would now have to sell it in order to maintain their economy, and they would have to sell it back to the same people they bought it from for $700 and $800 an ounce. They would have to sell it back to them in order to be able to put food on the table in their countries. They'd have to sell it back for $300 an ounce. It was all done by a designed, manipulated plan, planned in advance, and I knew it 6 months before it happened. Because I'd been told so by the senior executive of Atlantic Richfield, who kind of giggled over the phone and said, "Chaplain, come on now. You know who's doing this."
Hey, interesting. Hey, right? Very cool. So I've gone through a lot of clips and a lot of things like this over the last few months, particularly the last few weeks and stuff, and this is sort of why I felt like doing Money Part 3 was very valid now. And this one is going to be a bit of an overview, all right? And I wanted to just offer a lot of components for you as an individual, have the data points, right? To have as pattern recognition, okay? So I'll just put this down. I might just have the image with me because it's quite dark, right? And I'm not going to take too much longer. I just want to offer one more clip, right? And it's relative to the Discordianism, right? And I've offered it a few times before and stuff like that. I think it's very potent time to offer it again, all right? To really not get caught up in the fear, all right? And see all the different layers of the narrative and stuff like that, all right? And there's a lot of, like, layer 1 is the majority of humanity. 2 is, say, conspiracy people or, you know, the government behind the scenes and stuff. And 3 is, like, the levels of, you know, the limits to growth sort of thing, central bodies like the UN, the Club of Rome, and probably these ruling elite that are manipulating the market and all this sort of stuff, right? There's a lot of vested interest in these, and a lot of people don't heal, and a lot of people aren't into the bigger scales and stuff. They're the centers of their own world, and, you know, they've got their own vested interests and beliefs and all that sort of stuff, and so they're not appreciating the bigger scales going on, a bit like what I've tried to offer. There's also a lot of effort to obfuscate and camouflage what is going on, so you don't know this stuff that I'm sort of saying, right? And so what I want to do is offer this Discordian clip to help you have a reference of how, like, information can be deliberately created, even like Trump, right? To me, I feel he's creating this sort of stuff so he can't be actually perceived of what's going on, because L is, like, assassinating a lot of people, right? They're their own variable that are undermining everything, so they're just trying to create peace, and then they'll go and assassinate people or bomb things to trigger a response and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of variables at play, but I feel it all comes back to the limits of growth and the concern of society growing too big and all that sort of stuff, right? So I hope, like, all of that I've offered so far is an ally to helping that, and enjoy this clip, right?
The spectacle, the drama, it was all about confrontation. Everything was a challenge.
The Justified Ancients of Mumu are the band everyone is talking about. But who on earth are they? Where did the Justified Ancients of Mumu come from?
The Justified Ancients of Mumu were one of the various warring imaginary cults that were mentioned in the Illuminatus trilogy. A fiction had infected Bill's consciousness and life.
Before Sweden, before Big in Japan, and before all these things, Bill had had his mind blown by a book called the Illuminatus trilogy. And this book was kind of like the sacred text of an underground 1960s religion called Discordianism. Discordianism goes back to a meeting between two friends in the 1950s in a bowling alley. This was Greg Hill and Kerry Thornley, and they used to meet to drink beer and try and work out why the world didn't make any sense.
And we were discussing philosophy, and we were talking about order and chaos. My theory was that order emerged from chaos. Greg's theory was that order was projected on the universe, that it didn't exist at all. And I said, well, you know, what we need is not so much an explanation for order, but what the world needs is an explanation for chaos. At that point, we decided to start a religion, and thus Discordianism was born. I'm interested in finding some technique by which great masses of people can be broken out of their authoritarian conditioning all at once.
A lot of what the Discordians did was called Operation Mindfuck. They would write letters to magazines with completely ludicrous positions then.
There are the same number of letters in Lincoln as there are in Kennedy, and both were assassinated by men with middle names and replaced by Johnsons.
The idea was to spread so much chaos and confusion that nobody would know what on earth was true. And this was the tradition that Bill and Jimmy picked up on.
Well, we nicked a lot of stuff, obviously, from Illuminati. It was just there, waiting to be used.
They discovered Discordianism through the core text of that religion, which was the Illuminatus trilogy.
The Illuminatus books were a total send-up of sci-fi and conspiracy fiction. They weave their way through all kinds of surreal fantasies and conspiracies.
I, Markov Cheney, discovered another hidden joke in my name.
Ken Campbell, already a well-established author and director, started an outfit specifically to perform a freewheeling adaptation of the novels.
When Santana's troops losing all fear because they was high on Rosa Maria.
The plays were a great success, despite the fact that the first performance lasted 12 hours. I went along there to find out what the Illuminati are.
But there may be the people behind the scenes who are really running things. I mean, it would seem a bit unlikely that Nixon was running things exactly, you know what I mean?
By a strange coincidence, the stage manager of the Illuminatus production was a young Bill Drummond.
Bill thought it might be a good idea if he actually read the books that it was based upon. By the time he got to halfway through the first book, he'd already read enough. Ken Campbell sent him out for a tube of Araldite, and Bill never came back. He wanted to actually go out into the world and be this book.
Taking on the name Justified Ancients of Mumu meant they were taking on the name forces of chaos who are at war with the music industry. So that was right there at the start.
Last year, we realised the time had come in the history of pop music where anybody, well, we thought anyway, anybody could have a number one. We could just reach out and grab it. So we thought we'd have one.
We went into the studio on a Monday thinking we were going to make a house track, you know, regular underground dance house track using a bit of the Doctor Who theme tune. We realised it was in triplet time, and you can't have house tracks in triplet time. And the only beat that we'd work with it was the glitter beat.
That track took itself over, really. It's like an out-of-control lorry.
And we just went for the lowest common denominator.
A couple of days into it, we realised how terrible it was.
By Tuesday evening, we realised we had a number one.
And we have a brand new number one on Top of the Pops this week. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's a car. Hear the Time Lords.
#1 song on the pop charts this week is allegedly the brainchild of an American police car called Ford Time Lord.
He sits in the studio and tells us what he wants and we actually do it for him.
The song was all my idea and we made a great record.
My earliest memory was wanting to be on top of the pops. Then finally I was on and I was at #1. Best thing. It only lasted for a week, then it was all over. It just dissipated in front of us.
I think most people thought that it was just a stupid record that everybody hated, which on one level it was, you know.
Doctrine at TARDIS had shown how easy it was to have a #1.
All you need to get to #1 is this pile of junk. Get 3 bits of other songs and stick them together with a bit of sellotape.
So the next step was to lift the curtain and show everyone else how to do it.
Some of these crop circles were the work of an underground dance band, the KLF, who've pulled a string of bizarre media stunts which have had everyone scratching their heads.
The idea was to spread so much chaos and confusion that nobody would know what on earth was true.
So where did the idea come from?
Bill.
Big brooms, put a plank across the bottom of the broom, tape it all up, and the whole thing got completely out of hand in our heads. And when they asked us, well, did you do it? I had to say, well, I don't know.
KLF is gonna rock you.
So we never set out at all to be this global, international, multi-successful dance, pop, crossover, whatever it was. That was never part of the game plan.
KLF is gonna rock you.
Ladies and gentlemen, KLF has now left the building.
Hey, thank you for making it to here, alright? I know I've got a lot and it's dark and all that sort of stuff. It's been a big effort for me to put all this together, right? So what I might just do, I hope you got a lot from that Discordian clip again with all this information. What I'm trying to do is just really recalibrate you and focus you and see through all the stuff going on and help you translate it all and, you know, be the best energetic anchor being on earth for all of humanity in all this, and let alone if you're into the sovereignty and calling back your codes and the aspects of society that are codependent on you and us, right? So what I might just do is show one more image quick, alright? I apologize for it being dark, but the image should be next to me. But what I've used this as many times in the past, right? And at the start I talked about the emotional state and the fear and the energetic influences and all that sort of stuff. So just realize like your nature of what, be accepting of where you are and what's going on. You might have like been distorted and not being able to perceive. The second one is like you get in fear and you limit the volume of data that you perceive, or the bottom is you're clear and stuff. Right, and I feel a lot of people retreated into their cubby sort of thing and just not perceiving at the volume that they could perceive, like going into the wave, like they're getting washed away by the churn of this world, right? I'll just show you the other image quick, right, that I wanted to. you'll see this better next to me in the image and stuff, but this is about the chipping away and growing and stuff. I honestly feel a lot of people have gone back, right? Don't even realize it. They've been influenced and gone back into the 3D 5 cents, not really appreciating all the bigger scales going on, right? So this is dark and I'm at the end, right? But what I'm trying to do in this offering is help you appreciate all this, get a lot more data of the variables at play, right? And then pick yourself up, brush yourself off, and push on, right? And just appreciate how advanced and masterful you are. You may be being caught up with this and there's not many allies around and all this sort of stuff and you're on your own. But this is an effort to empower you to see through it all. And it's a big information data download, right? To help you with your processing and pattern recognition to see what's really going on, right? So for me, it's about getting a lot of components here, right? The limits to growth and the overall, some big oil variables are the foundation of our society, which people don't really get. Landman I highly recommend, right? If you're looking for a series to binge and stuff like that, it's really, really epic. And the wisdom of the oil foundation to society, a bit like the clip I offered at the start. But this is just like I'm getting eaten alive. I'm going to have to stop, right? But this is an effort to really, you don't need to be a financial master and all that sort of stuff. It's the information is there and stuff. And ideally, like, you absorb this and it helps translate what's going on to help you navigate. And, if you're being in fear and uncertainty, it helps you pull yourself back and, just recognize if there's influences, you need to maybe do something about it and to play the long life whole, right, of our peak awareness era, right, and not get caught up in the short-term churn that might be influencing others and stuff like that, to help you power through and be an ally for us all, right? So apologies for the dark, it's interesting times and stuff like that, and this was a lot of effort for me to all put together and stuff and make all the clips and just realize how long it would be and all that. And what I'll look to do is, I've offered a lot of the clips here just to be reference points, and potentially I want to build upon them, right? And I'll refer back to this part 3, okay? So thank you as always for being here. I hope you get a lot from this. I hope this helps you navigate the uncertain times that we may be in. And I'll look to offer more in this theme in the future when it's light, right? So I hope you get a lot from this. And until next time, Andre, the brat from down under, on his game, loving life and hoping you are too, right? Wishing you all the best, and until next time, lots of love and bye for now.
In December, heading for the city lights. 975, we sharing each other, nearer than farther. The scent of the lemon drips from your eyes. We are the people that rule the world. What's running in every boy and girl? All rejoicing in the world. Take me now. We can drive. We live in adventure.
John Lilly once put it this way: there are no limits at all to the human mind whatsoever, except those we impose on ourselves because of our beliefs. And those limits are also beliefs to be transcended. And that's a view that suggests that the possibilities of human transformation are virtually infinite. And we have no way of knowing the outer horizon of what it means to be human.
And really, to understand all this, everything, you have to go very, very deep into a study of history, consciousness, neurophysiology, everything. You have to be the supreme eclectic type of leaning, and you really have to be wanting to know who you are and what everything's about.
And the thing that you'll find when you go to sacred sites, if you're very humble about it, is that you are on a personal journey, and the sacred site will respond to you in a way that is appropriate only to you. The information is always what you are searching for. And it's the intent you give that energy that defines whether it is used for right action or not. And it is inside these sacred spaces that you will be reminded that you are a god, that you are a bright star.
So what you're trying to do is move through the course without ricocheting off walls or creating karma. You're trying to slide through things smoothly. How do you do that? It's called flowing. There's a technique that you can do that will allow you to touch some part of your inner being that has more knowledge than your conscious state does.